Well, now it's taken us 45 minutes to an hour to get here, but it's finally closing time. And so you're doing this listing presentation with the expectation that you're going to have some paperwork signed here. You're going to take this listing. So you've already made the determination that this is a listing you want, and you've been able to take your seller through a process of steps, and you're pretty convicted now that, yeah, this person, I think they're going to work with me. I think we're going to find some success together. And so the whole closing aspect, I do it from a kind of project management standpoint, and I'll say, here's the next steps over the next 30 days. And so what I usually leave with the customer at that time, the seller, is a copy of the paperwork. And so I'm going to cover the paperwork that they're going to be signing. And so many times what I'll do is I'll actually print out a physical copy of agency. I'll print out a physical copy of the listing contract and maybe a blank seller disclosure document. Because what I want to do is make sure that they're comfortable enough that they feel like they've had enough time to review these documents and I'm just not slapping them on them cold, right? So in this day and age of digital signature, something has kind of been lost, I think, a little bit with digital signature. We have a tendency as of agents to just send an invitation to sign a document if you're using DocuSign or if you're using Dotloop or SkySlope or one of those methods for digital signature collection. We fabricate the paperwork in there. We send it off. Click, 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 click. Hey, you're done. But many times people have questions about those documents, or they're just not comfortable, or maybe they're too comfortable and they just start clicking away and they don't even really realize what they're signing. So you're not an attorney, and I don't recommend that you practice law without a license, but the truth of the matter is these basic, simple fill-in forms are very standardized. Doesn't really matter what jurisdiction you're working in or what state, what county in the country. You're going to have some pretty standardized type of things that you're going to be dealing with. Now, they might be standardized to you, and you may have looked at that document 100 times, but, what if your seller has been in their home for the last 15, 20 years, and it's been 20 years since they've sold a property? Don't assume they're going to be comfortable with the paperwork. I recommend you give them a sample in advance. I also recommend that you do get some sort of a signature on a hard copy at that time on some kind of document. And so for me, that document's agency. So what I want to do is, as I'm introducing and covering paperwork, I'm going to hand them agency. I'm going to explain agency. I'll say, hey, because I've got a license, I owe everybody, certain duties, rights, obligations, and responsibilities under the rules and laws of agency. That, I have to have fair dealings with everybody in the public because I'm licensed, and I also have to have disclose things that I know about. And so that's how I have to treat everybody. But because I'm working with you specifically, I owe you an additional level of responsibility over the top of that. It's fiduciary responsibility, which means I have to act in your best interest. And so by signing this document, this basically says that I can start saying and doing things. I'm talking to other people about your property with your permission. Now, is that an oversimplification of agency? A little bit, maybe, but I'm giving them the document to read. I'm asking them to sign it. As they sign it, is it real? Yeah, it's real. It's a disclosure, right? So is it a binding document? Yeah, kind of. I'm bound by it because it comes with the gravity of all the rules around agency I have to comply with. But I haven't really agreed on a listing contract. But what I have done is I've measured someone's responsiveness and willingness to sign paperwork. Sometimes we go through the presentation and we get all this stuff done, and then we get to okay, it's time to sign paperwork. And, sometimes people freeze, or they say, gosh, I'm just not comfortable. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And they freeze up. I've seen lots of agents just kind of gloss over this and say, hey, you know what? Not a problem. You're going to sign this. You're going to get digital signature, blah, blah, blah. And they just, breeze through it. Then, a month later, 45 days later, 2 months later, something comes up and it's a problem. Why? Because you didn't establish enough comfort level with this person's understanding of the paperwork they're going to sign. Okay. So Always, always, always do that. That's what I do. Next thing I want to talk about at this time, at closing time, is how commissions are divided and how they're distributed. So why do I bring up commissions? Why? Because there's a lot of people who just don't understand how commissions are divided. Let's say you're selling someone's $500,000 house and you're taking a 6% listing. They might think you're putting $30,000 in your pocket. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Because there's a buy side and a sell side if you're not going to double end it. And statistically, we don't double end most of our deals. Most of our deals are not done that way. So half of that 6% is going right off the top to another brokerage. Now, on top of that, do I keep all 3% and put it in my pocket? No, because I'm affiliated with a brokerage brand that I've got a contract with them, and they take a cut of that, a split of it. So all of us are very familiar with this, but guess what? There's many times that your sellers are not familiar with this concept, and just don't assume that they are because, they're intelligent and sophisticated people. Maybe they haven't sold a home in 5 or 10 years or 15 years. Maybe no one's actually really explained it to them. So why am I doing this? I'm doing this because, sure, if it's a hot market, homes are selling quickly. I put a sign in the front yard. I get this home under contract within a week, and it closes within 45 days. And boom, gosh, you made $30,000. You didn't do anything. You hardly did anything. You put it, nothing could be further from the truth. Number one, I didn't make $30,000. Number two, I still had to go through all the steps I had to go through to make sure that this transaction was done correctly. The paperwork was filled out correctly. I maximized value by promoting the house as much as I possibly could. Oh, and by the way, I use a fraction of my commission to help promote the house. If you've ever printed open house flyers, if you have an open house sign, if you paid for a lockbox, if you're a member of the MLS, all of this is business overhead for you. And where does this overhead get paid out of? Well, it gets paid out of your gross commission income. So you are taking a fraction of your commission to be able to cover all these additional expenses. In addition to that, you might do a single page, a single address website for a particular home. You might do Google AdWords. You might do any other types of promotional things that you're paying for, door hangers, mail pieces. You did a 4-page brochure. You did an open house flyer. You had some graphic design work. You did some printing cost, and on and on and on and on and on. You may have paid for some staging. You may have paid for some photography. It's important that your seller understands how commissions are divided, because if they come back to you and say, well, I just talked to a guy at the brokerage up the street. He says he'll do it for 1.5%. You're charging me 6%. They're charging me 1.5%. Well, no. You have to educate that person around, well, what are you getting for 1.5? Does that include the other side of the transaction, or is it just the listing fee? And for 1.5, do they have enough money available to promote your home correctly and give you a level of service that's going to ensure that you get the highest possible value for your house? So had I not set all this groundwork before this time, I'm going to have an uphill battle. But because I did go through highest valuation, market exposure, all these things, because I did that in the listing presentation, now when I start talking about commissions and how those things are divided, I've already established, an intelligent dialogue around the fact that no, I can't reduce my commission. So had I answered this in the first 5 minutes of my original presentation, guess what? It just would have been a disaster, because I can't do it, and then you're just stuck there, and that no just hangs out in the air without any context around it. Okay, so we go through. Hey, over the next 30 days, these are the steps. I'm going to go through the paperwork, have them sign agency, which means I'm getting some sort of a commitment. I'm going to describe to them how commissions are split. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to settle on a price. Okay. So we've already talked a little bit about price, and I initially started bringing this up when we started talking about comps. Look at this picture and this picture. Look at this price and this price, right? Compare, contrast. How do you feel your home compares with this home? How do you think these two homes compare with each other? If you were a buyer, which house would you be more attracted to, right? So all within that discussion, I'm leading someone to a range. So when we finally get to settling on a price, what I'll usually say is something like this. I'll say, look, in order for us to make sure the system and the process works well, we need to make sure that your home is in alignment with market expectations. And so in alignment is a euphemism for it better be priced attractively to attract people, right? Your home has to be in alignment. If it's not in alignment, we're not going to get as many people through the doors we want. So I recommend that your home value, our initial starting place should be between this number and this number. Give them a range. Give them some kind of context. Don't just come out of the chute and say, well, what do you want to list your house for? Guide them through this process because they may or may not know. You've already set up a lot of groundwork to establish how this is actually going to happen. So just throw the number out there. And when you give them a range, do yourself a favor. Don't make that range, 10% or 15%. Well, I think your home's probably worth between 300 and 350. For gosh sakes, you're not doing yourself any favors. You might want to say something more like, I think your home is most likely to keep it in alignment is going to range between 315 and 320 or 315 and 317, somewhere right around there. They might come back and say, no, I don't want to list it for that. I want to go 320, 325, or whatever they come back with at that time. You're like, okay, so if we do that, we might limit the amount of people who come and take a look at it. This might mean that we might have fewer showings. Are you okay settling on a lesser price? So I am having that discussion right at this point. I'm going in because I want to keep this price as realistic and attractive as possible so I can have as many showings as I can. If I can't negotiate correctly at this point with my seller, what am I demonstrating to the seller? I'm demonstrating that I can't negotiate. How do you think that's going to go over when offers come in and you're countering offers? Right? Sometimes I'll even, if this becomes a struggle with my seller and they're just not kind of subscribing to the basic rules that I've set out, I might concede. I might concede on the higher price. Now, I'm not going to take an overpriced listing. I just won't do it. What I will do is, I take a listing at a valuation that's at the top of what I think the value scale is. Yeah, I'll do that. But I'm not going to do it without a fight. I'm going to put up a legitimate discussion about it. And then how I concede is very graceful. I'm like, look, okay, we'll list it at 325. However, if we don't have an appropriate level of offers coming in the first week or 2 weeks, I'd really like to revisit this discussion. I'm setting them up for the fact that, hey, if we make this compromise in the price, we're going to have to make sure that we monitor this situation very, very closely. Okay. If they come back and say, no, it's going to be 355, 370, 410, like whatever that number is, then for God's sakes, don't take an overpriced listing. Take care of this right now. You never have more credibility in this discussion, in this relationship. You never have more credibility than when you're in the listing presentation. As time goes by and the home doesn't sell, your credibility gets less and less and less. Even if it's a validation of what you'd said earlier, if you compromise and take the overpriced listing, please understand your credibility is at risk. It's also at risk with other brokers in the area, quite honestly. Like, oh my God, the guy lists anything at any crazy price. I don't even bother showing it, right? Don't get that reputation. It's not going to help you. Okay, so we settle on a price, and then I get that commitment. And the odds are really good that I've already filled out the listing paperwork digitally, and it's sitting in my laptop. My listing contract's fully filled out. The only thing that's not filled out is the price, right? Everything else is in there. So I could flip open my laptop, add the price, and finalize the document package and send it to them for DocuSign immediately. I could finish that process and flip my laptop around and say, here's the rest of the paperwork. So what I'm really doing, I have to measure this person's response because I don't want to hand them a sample of the contract at 10 minutes before I'm asking them to commit to the whole thing and not having read it. However, there are some circumstances where that's totally appropriate. If you have enough of a relationship with this person, you've worked with them before, or they're very familiar with the paperwork, and they have a comfort level to sign, maybe consider having them sign right there. Okay. All right. Settling on the price. I might finalize the documents right then and there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk them through like that first 30 days. So I'm going to send them paperwork. Then we're going to talk about staging. When is staging going to happen? What day does that, look like it's going to be viable? We need that staging looking really, really good before photography. And so we normally have staging like 2 weeks before or 3 weeks before we go live with the grand opening event. And then the photography is right behind that. We tell them about media placement. Where are you going to put this media? Where are you going to put those images? So you're walking them through a marketing timeline and a marketing calendar. Like, these are the things that are happening. The grand opening event weekends is when we introduce your home to the property, and that's going to happen on this day, right? And then what we're going to do at that point, we're going to assess activity levels, and we're going to counter offers that come in. And if that doesn't happen, then we need to prepare for a second outreach. And that's really where you're talking about reevaluating pricing and price reductions. What went wrong? If something went wrong, if you have this big event, no one shows up, something went wrong, it means you probably priced the home incorrectly, or you didn't promote it correctly. Well, I guarantee you promoted it correctly because you have proven how you do that, right? So at that point, if it's still rocky, you have to requalify the seller's intent and their core motivation. Remember way, way back near the beginning of this presentation when we talked about the seller interview? This is where it comes back into play. If I had to struggle to get some sort of a reasonable price and we list it, I'm sure I'm going to sell the home because my method works great. If I make a compromise and it's near the top of the range and I'm in a declining market and I promote the house and it goes live in the MLS and I get a fairly anemic response, I don't have that many brokers that are interested, and I'm not getting any real lobby traffic or no real traffic or inquiries from the general public, I need to come back to my seller very quickly. Like, don't let this season, right? Spoiled milk doesn't get better if you wait another day, another 2 days, another week. Well, maybe it'll come back. Wait, no. You're a professional. There's no such thing as maybe, right? You need to go back to them and say, look, we didn't have any showings, or we had very few showings. Why? Your home is not in alignment with the market. Let's revisit your core motivation for selling in your timeline. And let's really reevaluate how much money you're going to net out of this transaction. And are you okay with this number, this revised number? Let's not wait. Let's reduce this price. Let's get this job done. Please hit that subscribe button. And don't forget, visit our website and schedule your free 30-minute evaluation.